Hello, I'm Sandra Scheller with Our Lives, Our Future. You're about to see an incredible interview with the daughter from the artist in Auschwitz, Dina Babbitt. I am with Karin Babbitt. We have a lot to talk about. Stay tuned. We have a YouTube show in Chula Vista called Our Lives, Our Future. And what we do is we go in depth with people. And I'm so blessed to be with Karin Babbitt, whose mother was Dina Babbitt. In fact, if we look up whose mother is Dina Babbitt, because her artwork continues to radiate around the world through the portraits that she painted, having her life saved. So, Karin, are you comfortable telling me a little bit about this?
Okay. So what I can say is that through a series of remarkable circumstance, my mother found herself in Auschwitz in the children's barracks, where a young man who had led the youth group in Czechoslovakia, Freddie Hirsch, was in charge of the children in the barracks, and he asked her to paint a mural. And it so happens that the last movie she remembers Jews being allowed to see was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and then they removed that permission. But she was so entranced with one scene where Dopey blows a feather in the air and watching the way that it moved, that she went in again and again, even when it was illegal, removing her star to go see it, which was, as you know,
a no-no.
Death-defying.
Death-defying.
So she gets to Auschwitz. Freddie asked her to do the mural, and they had acquired some paints from somewhere, and she paints what she can remember from memory, because the kids all say it was their favorite and they wanted to see that. So it was discovered by some SS that there was someone who could paint, and they started asking her to do portraits of them and their family members. And who is she to say no? So she's painting these portraits, and Mengele hears, Dr. Mengele, Angel of Death, hears that there's someone who does portraiture and is good at capturing the tone of skin. And he's very interested in gypsies because of their, let's call them Roma. So she becomes told that she needs to capture the skin tone and other racial characteristics of Roma. And so this day comes when she is taken in a Jeep, and she figures she's going to be killed. And she's taken right to Mengele. And Mengele tells her that there is no good color photography, and they see that she can capture skin tones and other things. And they need her to go to what they called the gypsy camp and select some Roma to study. So she goes and she finds a number of people. And after a while, Mengele gets tired of her taking her time choosing people and starts grabbing them and bringing them to her. And she paints, and she paints slowly, because as long as she paints, she has a feeling they'll live. And she starts having intimate relationships. They don't speak the same language, but there's an intimacy if you're an artist, as you well know, Sandy, where she's capturing the faces of these people. And there was one in particular, a woman named Celine, a young mother whose baby had just died from lack of milk, who had a blue scarf on. And my mother was painting her slowly, but her main objective, she said, was to capture the desperation in their eyes, because that would communicate to the world what was really happening to the Roma, if she could just get the eyes desperate enough. And as she was painting Celine, Mengele came in, and he was angry that she was looking desperate and beautiful. And he grabbed the scarf on her head and shoved it behind her ears and was trying to point out the inferiority of her hairline. And so my mother was obligated to do the hairline. She was given extra rations of bread so that she could work, and she gave them to Celine to keep Celine going. And so there were 12 people all in all that my mother got to know through the intimacy of art and paintings of. And several times during this escapade, several times her life was threatened. I mean, the one day that stands out, Sandy, is the day they said they were going to put her mother into the line to be gassed. And my mother said to Mengele, if you do, I'm going to go hold on to the electrified fence. And so they didn't kill my grandmother. So there were other things that my mother was forced to paint, terrible hydro experiments with putting Jews in ice baths and seeing how long it would take them to die. And one day when we were walking through Auschwitz together in the 90s, we walked to a staircase and she said, this is the staircase where the soldier had passed out. He had walked in and seen what she had to paint, and he became ill and passed out on the stairs. And she was forced to sit and paint and paint and paint. And that's the story.
Did your mother ever not like painting because it brought back memories?
What I remember is how difficult it was for her to paint, and how we couldn't understand how an artist like she wouldn't be painting. And she would start, she started a lot of things and could not complete them. There was a bust of her cousin Stephanie, who they called Iffy. And she worked on this bust the whole time, my entire life. She worked on this bust until she died when I was in my 50s. And she was never done, never satisfied. It was never right. And I took the bust that was left after she died, and I had it cast, first in plaster and then in bronze. And I have the bronze in the other room. I should have brought it. And it was the one thing that she said it wasn't complete, but to me, it's complete. And she would make this, she made Iffy out of oil clay. And she would walk by it and she would smooth her hand on Iffy's cheek so she could feel like she was still with her Iffy.
Wow. Did you meet your grandmother?
I did. My grandmother really raised me with my mother. And she had two sides to her. She was funny, amazing, funny, and very harsh. She wanted us to make our mother happy, and she wanted the sum total of our existence to be about honoring my mother as a saint who saved people, and that we owed her our life. And this was a very big onus to live under, as I'm sure you've experienced also.
Did your grandmother live with you?
On and off, mostly nearby, because their relationship was, tense. So it was considered best to have her live in proximity and not in the house.
Did you ever learn Czech?
No, just words that you don't say in public.
I know.
They spoke mostly in Austrian German. That was their.
That's what I'm saying. Did you speak German?
No, because they would start with Der Kinder and then start talking to each other, and it was always about us. And they wanted to have a secret language. They would not speak it to us or teach it to us. They didn't want us to know. But what's fascinating now is when I go to a German-speaking place, very often I understand an awful lot of what is being said.
When you don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't think about it, all of a sudden it's like, why do I understand this?
Yeah.
And it's crazy because your mom, if I can say this, and my mom could have been sisters so easily.
Could have been sisters.
Coming from Czechoslovakia, knowing Freddie Hirsch, knowing what they went through. Did Freddie give Mama a warning about how horrible the place was, as Freddie gave my mother?
I never heard a story about that. The only stories I heard about Freddie was that there was a man that everybody had a crush on when they were in the Czech Republic. And coincidentally, for what it would matter, is that he was gay, and that he was then in charge of the children's barracks. And my mother knew that the children would at least have the comfort of Freddie Hirsch while they were there, because he was brilliant at caring for young people. Couldn't have been in better hands.
You put the words out of my mouth. He was brilliant at taking care of people. And as my mother told me, when after seeing Heaven in Auschwitz, that my mother could finally open up about Freddie Hirsch, that she would cry when talking about him because he was such a beautiful man that she never met anybody like him. He was like, as she would say, an angel, some sort of an angel.
Yeah.
And that going into the children's area of the camps and saying, you must get up, you must help the older people, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, creating this youth group called Yad Tomeket, the Helping Hand. Ruthie was able to tell me about these things. And I wanted to know if Miss Dina did the same to you.
No, but she definitely, he became a deity in our household. And she would try to sketch him now and again. And if I probably dug around, I could find some of her attempts. But she was just, again, felt frustrated that she could never get it right. It's just so interesting that they acquired their paints. I forget the word she used. It wasn't acquire, but it had to do with illegally, dangerously getting paints. And he made that way more important than his life, to find something to cheer the kids. After they did she did the mural, they started doing theater. They did a play of Snow White, where the dwarves were Jews in the camps, and the girl who played Snow White no longer had hair. So my mother remembered making her a sort of a wig out of curled paper. And the SS came to see it, and they were very taken by this performance, and they did not understand that
they had tears in their eyes. While they have their swastikas and their guns, they are in tears watching Snow White.
My mother says they did not understand that the Jews were the dwarfs and that the evil was the Nazis. She felt that they related to it on a different level. I don't know if that's true.
Quick question. How did you find out that your mother was in the Holocaust?
Well, my mother had a tattoo on her arm, and so did my grandmother. And I remember her routine in the morning. She would put on her lipstick and put on her eyebrows, and then her last flourish was this tube of stuff by Max Factor called Erase. And it was supposed to be skin tone, but it was always too pink. And the last thing she would do is open it up like a lipstick, scrub it on her tattoo, and go out for the day. So one knows about the tattoo. But the thing is that Auschwitz is the elephant in the room, and there is no bigger elephant. It is always, always, always about Auschwitz. Every meal, every television show, every breath, every compliment is in reference to Auschwitz. It lives there. And one day when I was little, I was very angry at her, and I just went in one of her drawers and I found a pad of foolscap yellow paper. And I started reading, and it was her memoirs. And I made about a page and a half, and I wanted to throw up, and I actually put it back in the drawer. And that drawer terrified me for the rest of my childhood.
Wow, Karin. So she kept notes, she kept a book, she kept memoirs.
People told her she should write, and she tried. And again, she could never get the words that she wanted to get out on paper. Especially, she couldn't. So she told stories, she told tales. She told tales about, for instance, Vayushko. Vayushko had been, I think, a professor in a small town. And she said he was the silliest man she knew. And they would be standing there in Appel having to take roll. And Appel could go on for hours. You could not move one muscle in Appel while they were recording every person in line. And she would feel something being pushed into her hand. Outrageous that anyone would do this during Appel. You'd get shot, right? So later on, after Appella's over, she'd sneak behind a barrack and look, and there would be a nonsense limerick on the page, on the little scrap of paper. Nonsense. And she would tell me about Vyushka's last note he passed before he was taken to the gas chamber. And it was about the strange bird, the Vyushka, who lands on a twig and the twig breaks and something happens, everything falls apart, and then the Vyushka flies away. And these are the stories that they would tell me, little stories about people. Ruzha, who was a prostitute and fatter than everyone, and they knew she was fatter because she had connections in the kitchen. And when Ruzha finally had to walk off to the gas chamber and then the crematoria, my mother's asked her, "Where are you going?" And she said, "Up. And when the biggest ash of all lands on your nose, it's me."
Oh my gosh.
And when my mother was dying during her last year and realized—
In what year?
2009.
Hmm?
When she was dying, she put down the phone from her doctor and looked at me and says, "I'm going up."
Wow. How long from the time she said, "I'm going up," did she pass?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And I knew it was the end, truly the end, because she sat down at the table she always sat down on to put on her eyebrows. She wouldn't go anywhere without eyebrows. She had a heart attack once, and I'm standing next to her just going, "Mommy, mommy," waiting for the ambulance. And she whispered to me to come close, and I thought she was going to say, "I love you," or "The secret treasure is buried in the backyard." And what she said was, "Bring me my eyebrow pencil." And she actually drew on her eyebrows during a heart attack, so she'd be cute for the ambulance. Anyway, so she sat down at the dining room table.
Karin, I'm sorry for saying this. I'm laughing because my mother did the same thing.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. My mother was on dopamine. She had 2 weeks to live, and all she cared about is what she looked like. And when finally they had to remove the dopamine to take her to a different hospital, all she cared about was making sure that she looked perfect.
Sandy, that's
I
how they
kid you not.
survived. That's how they survived, looking good. That was their weapon. So I knew she was going to die. She drew on one eyebrow, and she was about to start the second. And she got up from the table and went to her bed and never got out of her bed again.
Wow, Karin. Wow. My I don't know if you know, but my grandmother worked in a kitchen, took labels, any kind of label you could find, like example, here's this glue label, and she would, let's say, boil the label to get the colored water. And then she would go to the girls and put this colored water on to make them look older, to make them look healthier. A lot of people that had looked sick, she took them and she found her purpose. You know, and this is how my family was, that they had to be super perfect. And I'm telling you, for me, I'll go out without makeup. It doesn't matter to me because I care what's in here rather than sometimes what's here.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know very well what you mean.
I march to the beat of a different drummer, and I think Karin Babbitt does the same thing.
Yes, but I still have the voice inside of me. If you're not beautiful, you're invisible.
What I hear my mom say to me is that what your mother would like? Is that what are you defying? Is this how your mother would want you to be? I hear that voice all the time, and I've never told anybody.
Wow. So, okay, if it's truth or dare.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother was a fan of plastic surgery.
Mm-hmm.
She had 3 facelifts in her life. And it was my birthday. I was somewhere in my 40s. And my mother says, "I'm going to give you a gift." I'm like, wow, what is that? She says, "I am going to tell you critically everything that is wrong with your face."
No, Karin,
Yeah.
no. Wow.
A gift that lasts.
And I hope you did nothing.
I wouldn't listen to it. I was like, nope, no thanks, pass, hard pass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One day I want to sit with you and compare
Ugh.
ways that we were raised, but not where we are recording. And it's very interesting as the second generation. Are we doing what our parents want us to do for Holocaust awareness for the future? Because it sits in our lap.
I don't think I am, but see, I have a very mixed message. My mother's maintained that there was nothing more important than her life, her experience. And though I taught it when I was teaching high school and tried to joke about it on stage at the Comedy Store, that didn't go over. She also had this other piece where we fought for the paintings, we fought for her art because it was what was morally correct. And yet one of the things she said as she died, so incredibly devastated and disappointed that she never got to hold these 12 people ever again, that the story she thought was going to die with her. She said, please, enough, we've lost, and now you must have something, you must let go of it. And I don't have the sense that that is correct. And that's why my sister and I have not stopped fighting, because of what Neil Adams and Marvel Comics and everybody said, and all the cartoonists who signed the petition, Rafi Medoff and all those people, they said, you can't enslave somebody by retaining their art. This is like the last bastion of personal, the gift from a higher power has given you this remarkable gift and ability to do things that, as Mary Douglas, the sociologist, said, we're responsible for shaping society. If we don't do this thing, this important thing that we're gifted with, and it is taken from us, you're ripping out our heart, you're ripping out our soul. You're telling us that we never get to be complete citizens of the world. We are always slaves. We are always slaves, and that an artist has a right to their work. I mean, even with the Black folk art movement, that folk art, primitive art, as they say it so humiliatingly, these objects, these things are being returned to the families of the enslaved, right? But not to Jews.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm blessed in such a way that, yes, to have my grandmother's dress, the art pieces that my mother saved, but I also know that once I even attempt to lend it to an organization, I will never see it. So I do everything I can to build what I can here in my city. And I will tell you that the lessons of Dina will stay with me forever, absolutely forever. I mean it, because you can't let this happen. Nobody can come and say, but Mengele kept her alive. Fuck that. Okay.
Yeah.
How dare you put somebody in a camp in a situation like that, making them wear a star, humiliating them on the street, threatening them with death.
Well, Chemansky from the museum said that if they belong to anyone, they belong to Mengele, because she worked for him when she made them. So he owned them. He supported Dr. Mengele, Chemansky from the museum. That was their position. That's the letter they wrote to my mother. And they accused us of being materialistic. They said we just wanted money, right? Because, there's such a clamor for Roma portraits from Auschwitz. Yeah, they're all over those Gap t-shirts. No, What my mother wanted was to put them in the United States Holocaust Museum
Memorial
in the
Museum.
country that she loved, the
Yes.
country that
And,
gave
and
her
it's not up to them to make that decision, Karen. It's not. It's not. It isn't. It's like art. Your mother had an incredible talent. And what a friend of mine, Marta Beckett, would say, that Marta doesn't have talent, she has children. This artwork that your mother did happened to be a child. And it kept her alive like the food did. And that it belongs to her. I could see if she wants to make copies that can be used in a book.
She said,
but the originals need to go back home where they belong. I totally support you on that. And I hope whoever sees this Zoom will understand the importance of this, because I hope in my lifetime, I will see a Holocaust museum in my city. And maybe there's a way that by meeting people, we can figure out how to get these paintings back to you and your sister.
that would be amazing. I would love to show my children that life doesn't always have a sad ending.
No, no, you have to do a lot of fighting. One thing I learned, a lesson from my mother: never, never, never give up. You just hold something in your pocket long enough, and then eventually something will work. And I think if enough people squeak and enough people see this, and as Aaron and Esther are showing heaven in Auschwitz, and people ask what the latest is on Dina Babbitt's portraits, and especially with Comic-Con, I mean, we got to figure out how we can do this.
Okay.
And I'm happy to jump on the bandwagon for that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because
No, I'm not going to give it up.
Nobody. You kind of feel like you're yelling into an empty well.
I'm not going to give it up. I'm not. I'm just not. And I understand how people are like that. But I think if enough people can understand and circle the place and say, let my paintings go, like we said, let my people go, maybe there's a chance.
We tried in the late 90s. We tried. And my sister
What's bizarre? It's a matter of one or two people sitting behind a desk, probably not even knowing what these things are, that are saying knit, knit, knit. Or
I don't think that's the case here. I think the case here is that so much of the Polish government is based in the plunder of war, that they're afraid if you make one little crack in the dam, that
it's going to open up the floodgates.
Objects back. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm sure that's what it is.
Let me ask you, did you ever see the originals?
Not me. No, there's that story I told you. We went with the Today Show to try to get them in the late 90s. And first of all, they told us that there was a guide who would show us around. And it turns out the guide, I mean, it was like an Eloise book. Eloise Goes to Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. The guide was actually somebody on their board. It was very long and complicated. But they kept saying that their argument was that they were on display, and that is why we couldn't have them back, because they were having a big impact on the world. And yet they would not let us go see the display. It went on for 3 days. And during the 3 days, they toured us places. We followed along. We went on a tour, and they took us into a brick building in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And they were talking about, this is a building where, and I don't know what they said, infirmary or something. My mother said, this is the book with the hydro torture. And the guide said, oh no, that didn't happen.
With the water.
That didn't happen. With the ice baths, mm-hmm. Putting you in an ice bath so you died. And so my mother showed them on the wall. You could see where the pipes were and the edge of the vats. You could see it in that room. And they lied and lied and lied to us. And they said, no, we're not making any profit over her paintings. And I went into the bookstore and found 3 books they were selling with the paintings in them, So finally, on the 3rd day, they take us into this little brick room that has bars on the window, like a jail. We go into this room, and there is an art gallery. There's a display of objects and things. And you can smell the fresh paint to just about knock you over. So it's very obvious that this place was thrown together in a hurry. And they take us in there and they point to the very top of the ceiling. And you have to imagine the cruelty. Like I'm looking at the top of your ceiling right now. The cruelty of taking a little 70-odd-year-old woman, tottering in there, and her work is screwed into the very top by the ceiling, her 12 pictures. So like there's no way. And my mother says, bring me a ladder. Bring me a ladder. And they have to, right? There's cameras. So they go and they bring this A-frame ladder and my mother starts climbing this thing. I'm like, oh my God. So I start climbing after her. So at least she'll land on something soft, right? She gets to the very top of the ladder and she's eye to eye with these. And she's telling me they're in there with a Phillips screwdriver. They've screwed these things in. And she looks at them and she goes, these are very good copies. And I'm like, they're copies? Why would they go to all that trouble to display copies? She says, they're copies. The colors are wrong. The colors are completely wrong.
And the paper is wrong.
The paper's wrong. Because when she went to, they had her authenticate them in the 70s when they first notified her, hey, guess what? We found your paintings. And she's a broke single mother, borrows a suitcase, borrows the money to go to Poland, goes back to Auschwitz, right? And they open up this drawer and they put them on her lap and they curl, they curled right up because they were in rolls and they're
Right.
yellowed. And she puts her hands on them and she feels herself just cracking from the inside. And she's so grateful. And she starts putting the people in her suitcase and they grab it out of her hands. And they said, that's all we needed.
How big are they?
The copies, I don't know, they're like 12 by 12 or something. They're not that big.
Mm-hmm.
There's something like that. I don't know the exact dimensions. And, the whole argument is, why don't you display the copies? I mean, they were displaying the copies. No, it has to do with them releasing plunder and having that somehow have the bottom fall out. Like my Netflix stock.
With the N on your cup. Karin, you're so hilarious. Okay, I want to see you soon. I want to ask you one last question. Do you feel any of your mother in you?
Well, that's the scary part. I want my life, but my life has been all about her life. But I feel her every second.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't you feel like the brother of the leukemia patient who is born because you're the one who can give the marrow transplant?
Yeah, yeah.
That's who we are.
And I look at my kids and I go, no, you're not going to get the dress. It'll go to a museum. You can visit it. Your kids can visit it. After the PR that we've done on it with book and a film, the bottom line is I'm not going to keep it locked up in a place. It's not fair, but it has to be seen like at one of our museums. Has to be. But I don't want my kids to go through the burden.
I get it. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely third generation damage. There's a lot of cleanup. I remember one of my kids in the 4th grade, everybody's writing reports about different things. And here she is, all she can do is write about Auschwitz. She said, freaking 4th grade. Oh my gosh.
Did your mother ever talk to kids in the school?
Yeah, mostly at my behest. Like a few times she talked, once at UCSC, she talked a couple places, but she was not one of these people who regularly was committed to going out and speaking. She was someone who wanted peace. She wanted dogs and she wanted trees. Peace, dog, and trees.
An eyebrow pencil.
An eyebrow pencil. Bring me eyebrow pencil. Well, and when she died, and I'm looking at her body and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to put her in a silk nightie just so she'll look hot, because I know she'll want the people to say that beautiful woman died. So I put her in a beautiful pine green silk long sleeve nightshirt. And my daughter brings her makeup kit to me and says, got to make her up. And then she left the room. And I sat there and I made her eyebrows and her lips and her cheeks, her soft cheek.
Oh, Karen. Do you do art? You do comedy. Do you paint?
Okay, so went to a little bit of art school, and my mother always swore, "Oh, you have such talent," but I could show you piles and piles of art supplies that I throw away with a great flair and then repurchase a few years later. And so what I am is an art supply purchaser. Sometimes I draw. I have some secret drawings. I'll show you someday.
I'll show you mine.
Okay.
Nothing to write home about. But I feel like if I have any of it, it's from my mom. The other thing I will tell you is, yes, I have a lot of art supplies that will outlive me. I'm at that point when I turn 60 that the art supplies will outlive me, and that'll be okay. Now I have to find the time to do it.
Yeah, I tell myself when I retire, I'm going to take a painting class.
You're never going to retire. You are the world's hilarious comedian, girlfriend.
Oh, gosh. Thanks.
And I will come up and visit you for sure. I promise you.
Well, I'm supposed to go down to Temecula in September. Is that near you?
Very near. I'm 45 minutes away. Stay with me. You got a home here.
Done.
You got a home here. Absolutely. Seriously. Karen, you're a sweetheart. You're a total sweetheart for doing this. I know I saw some tears, and we had tears here, and it can be painful, but this is something that we need to see. I don't know how much longer my Zoomy Doomy is going to go on. So if we get booted off, we get booted off. But I just want to thank you. I see you taking a deep breath. I'll do the same.
Okay.
God, why couldn't you be my sister?
You're my role model. That's what you are. I'm so impressed with what you do.
I'm impressed with what you do, because through things that you've been through and this journey, that you keep people laughing. I mean, how awesome is that?
Well, it's like a tick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything I think of is in punchlines.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's how I make it feel better.
Yeah.
I wrote my master's thesis about Holocaust humor.
Really?
Yeah. And guess what? The
What?
United States Holocaust Museum has a link to it on their website, and yet they won't fight for the paintings, but they will use my thesis.
Is that crazy?
Yeah.
They've used your thesis, which is great. They haven't fought for the paintings yet.
Okay.
Yet.
Yeah.
Now more people are going to jump on your bandwagon and build you a bigger ship.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, I know. I hear you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You're amazing, Miss Karen.
I love your bones.
I love your bones and your skin and everything that goes in between. So we'll definitely chat it up again if that's okay.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that would be super.
Thanks
you so much for doing this. We'll talk soon, okay? You bet.
Sister.
You got it. How am I? There we go.
You're good. Daughter of number 61016.
Hey, my mother didn't have the number. My grandfather had B11559. She was too short a time to be in there.
All right.
Yep. What's the number again?
61016. It's a palindrome.
60166.
Which made it really easy to get into her ATM.
Yeah. B or A?
No letter.
No letter.
And it was up on top because she was there a long time. And I always, this is what happens with my head. I forget, which means I sort of, I disassociate from it. Mm-hmm. So I know she was in 4 years.
Wow. Ruthie was from 91 in Teresian, then Auschwitz, then Iran, and then out. Yeah. Yeah.
And where?
in Uteron. It was a thread factory that they turned into a bullet factory. She made bullets.
Okay.
Wow. You know the story of what my mother did? She was 16 years old. She's at a bullet machine, right? Making bullets. She would find sand and stick it in her bullet machine. And she would clog it up. And then finally, they went to her and they, without a pencil and paper, told her how she needs to fix the machine. No pencil and paper. And then after a while, she'd clog it up again. This is the way my mother would say it. I would clog it up again. So they took her in her wooden shoes outside in the snow, and she's laying electrical cable. She could have ended up dying with the electrical shock. She survived. But it is interesting because I wonder at times, Karin, where if my mother went in memory lane, did she ever have the feeling like, well, I've been through this. Do I need to teach my children about this? How does one do that? I think that because we were born in the 50s, sorry for giving out an age here, but because of where we were born, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years after what they went through, did they even have the psychological mind to figure out what happened? And I wonder if my parents ever thought that this could happen again. Did your mom ever think that?
It was always that it will happen again. And my mother wanted to toughen me up. So she was very hard, very strict, very hard. Because she, as she told me, we had to make you tougher. You felt too much. You were too emotional. Yeah. And they gave me a very tough side.
Oh, I remember one time crying about something, and my father had to teach me what pain really was on the backside.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how many times I had that experience and some other experiences where I was shown what was really a qualifying occasion for crying.
Yeah. Yeah. And can I tell you, I think those experiences made me realize I will never, ever do this to my own children or to anybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing you in person.
Yeah.
And I'm going to sign off the right way, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you for being a part of this very special version of Our Lives, Our Future, as part of our Ruth, Remember Us, the Holocaust, as we remember Dina Babbitt, one of the greatest artists in Auschwitz, and probably, I'm going to say, the world. She really taught us how to look at life through pure colors. And if anybody kept her alive for that, you knew who it was. So, love you, kiddo.
Love you so much.
All right, we'll see you. If you need this footage, I have it, okay?
I'd like it, please.
All right, for sure. All right, over and out.